What's the weirdest thing a medical professional has casually said to you? I live in Ireland. The surgeon who replaced my hip is also a farmer. The day before I was due to be discharged, he came in on his rounds. He said, I may or may not see you tomorrow. It depends on the dog. So I said, oh, what's up with the dog? He told me the dog broke his leg and was having it set tomorrow, but he wasn't sure what time, so I said, sure, bring in the old dog and I'll mind him. This is rural Ireland, bear in mind, and I was in the convalescent area of the hospital by then, and shortly after breakfast he arrived in. With the dog, lovely border collie with his leg in plaster. He stayed with me watching TV till the doc was finished replacing another hip and was ready to discharge me, and we could all go home. It could only happen in Ireland. There's an ophthalmologist on TikTok who plays a bunch of different doctors, and my favorite is rural medicine. People pay him in crops or other non-monetary goods, and the only MRI is at the Texaco shop. The gas thing is that it's true. I couldn't imagine it happening anywhere else. I 100% believe this. I'm from a city in the US and was in Cary a few months ago visiting friends. They made sure I got a fresh copy of the local paper for all the hot gossip about farmer drama. Sheep falling off cliffs onto people, etc. It was quite the change of pace law. Rural places can be so down home in general, but Irish people have a warmth, casualness, and sense of humor about things that is unmatched. I feckin' love Ireland. Can't wait to return. My maternal family are all from Cork. I've seen similar sorts of chats myself. You probably recognize the vernacular lull. I could almost hear the vocal inflection of "it depends on the dog." I was surprised how friendly he was considering he was a working dog. They're not normally coddled much. This fella snuggled up. He was a lovely dog actually. The accent really comes out when you're delirious, huh? People don't usually ask where I'm from, but when I was in labor, the nurses kept asking. That was when I knew I was going to need an epidural. Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson should star in the movie version of this. This is the most Irish thing I've ever heard. I miss home sometimes, haha. There was a trauma surgeon who went by the Red Duke in Houston. He owned a ranch and was a real cowboy. He would roam the halls with his 2 golden retrievers. Eventually had to keep them in the med school. He brought the use of helicopter ambulances to the US. He was in the Vietnam War and drove a tank. Whenever a resident was upset after losing a patient, he would gently comfort them, then say in his military bravado, "Besides, you're not a killer. I'm a killer. I've killed more people than you ever will." The last one sounds like he was flexing too. It was lovely. All the nurses knew him too lol. I have never actually related that story before. Never occurred to me that anyone would be interested. There's actually a channel on YouTube dedicated to poking fun at the medical establishment, and a regular is Rural Doctor, who does everything for everyone as well as works as a veterinarian and carpenter mail carrier in Mayor. I think in other appearances he works as a veterinarian for sure though. I love Ireland. My husband is Irish, and we were back there visiting just a few months ago. I was enjoying a few hours to myself in a small town in Clare, and after walking around, I wanted to have a pot of tea and relax. So I opened the door to one of the many little pubs. I couldn't see any of the inside from outside, as it had a foyer kind of entry with a door on either side, so it was a mystery. The front room was cozy with a beautiful turf fire going, and it almost felt like someone's lounge room. A few people were there, dressed up and having a jolly time. It turned out they were there for pre-ceremony drinks for the town's wedding that day. I didn't want to intrude, but they were friendly and fine for me to come in. And the barman was welcoming too, happy to make me some tea. But he let me know first that there was a funeral on in the back room, and it was one of my most small-town Ireland moments, I think. Tiny pub hosting a wedding and a funeral at the same time. The turf fire, handwritten signs around the pub in Irish, and a well-stocked bar, which included a bottle of Muff whiskey, only added to the Irishness. That evening, we were at a gathering of our extended family in the region, and a few cousins had to leave for an hour or two to go and pay their respects at a funeral. You guessed it, the very same one from the pub. Was there a traditional Irish music session? Every good funeral has one. I've played at many lol. I'm sure there was, but not during the time I was in the pub. However, the very first night we arrived in Ireland this visit, We ducked around the corner to my husband's GAA club for a cheeky drink, and while we were there, 5 members came in casually with their instruments and there was a lovely session. I read that as he stayed with me watching TV till the dog was finished replacing another hip, and I'll forever have the image of a border collie doing surgery in my mind. Well, you know what the border collies are like. It's not beyond the realms, lol. Mind you, the doctor isn't as cuddly as the dog was. Dogs chilling with patients in hospitals is always a good move. Also, thank you for writing with the accent. Ah, Janie, sure, I hate to do that. Am also Irish and 100% confirm that this sounds eminently reasonable. Lol, you know how it is. He sat on the couch next to me and I fed him a few biscuits. Lol, he was great company. Not really super relevant to that particular story, but I've heard that people with pets heal faster. I don't know, I've always had animals around the house, so I've never had to recover without one lol. This could only happen in Ireland. I live up north and could picture it. I read the broke his leg as the doctor broke his own leg and was a tad confused for a sec. When I was like 20, my endocrinologist took a good look at me and asked, "Are you okay with your face being so asymmetrical?" I had never really noticed it before, but boy have I noticed it since. I can't even begin to Google search this without ending up on a list. If your comment is even real, I'm guessing the magnet is some kind of device that helps the muscle contract during bowel movements. Bert comment is even real. I'm guessing the magnet is some kind of device that helps the muscle contract during bowel movements. Just guessing here, but no. It is to control the opening. He didn't have an opening. He/she most likely had bowels and the bowels control that. This is one battery you never can let die. I'll never forget the first time I got my legs waxed. I was 23 and in Australia. I'm Irish. The woman doing it was probably in her 50s. She was making the usual chit-chat when out of the blue she asked me if I'd lost a lot of weight recently. I said no, and she was like, "Oh, it's just that you have loads of stretch marks on your legs." I knew I had some behind my knees/thighs, but it wasn't something that I really noticed. I remember thinking it was such an odd thing for her to say. She's working in the beauty industry and should be making me feel good, but what she said could have given me a complex. Thankfully it didn't, but from time to time, I remember that exchange and think about what a fucking insensitive bitch she was. The reason why she said that is because she's working in the beauty industry. I'm not saying she was necessarily aware of it, but the industry wants to sell you products. They don't want to actually make you feel good. It's the opposite, actually. The worse you feel, the more you'll buy, and those who work in it are conditioned by it to make you feel terrible. Either it's intentional or subconsciously. Oh, I get that they want you to feel insecure so they can sell you products you don't need to make you feel better about problems they cause. But that wasn't the case here. It's not like she offered to sell me a cream that would magically make my stretch marks go away if I just used it every day. She just blurted it out, and it stuck in my mind because it was so odd. I've had my legs waxed many times since then, and never had a similar comment. I've had beauty technicians try to upsell services/products, but nothing as blunt or weird as that. The stretch marks aren't even that noticeable. You literally wouldn't be able to see them unless you were up close, which she was at the time, lol. Just a side note, but all you can really do for stretch marks is use lotion to help prevent them from occurring to an extent, or, if you have them, use something like RX-grade acne medication like retinol to make them fade faster, but they will never actually go away. Don't waste money on products for it. Stretch marks are a badge of honor. Show off that you can squat 400 lbs, that your biceps are 22, or that you had a kid. Fuck it. Thankfully, I'm not bothered about my stretch marks. They're not noticeable unless you are up close. They've never affected my life, and apart from that one woman, no one has ever commented on them, which is probably why her words stuck out so much. We talk about women getting stretch marks on their stomachs during pregnancy, but it's not really talked about that you can get stretch marks during puberty, which is where mine came from. My sister has noticeable stretch marks on her thighs and she's quite tall for a woman, so we think they came from a growth spurt. My very slender 18-year-old son has horizontal stretch marks on his lower back from growing taller. I've had stretch marks since puberty, and I think that it's much more common than I realized. My son was exactly the same. He was small for his age, and then he suddenly shot up to 6 feet. I panicked when I saw his back. I thought he'd been attacked and hadn't told me. Then I realized it was stretch marks. This happened to my boyfriend when he was a teen as well. His dad noticed and freaked out, so now he's forever self-conscious of it. I always presumed it was common for women and men during puberty. I'm a woman and have stretch marks on my thighs on the inside and outside, all up my hips and behind my knees. My breasts have them as well, even though I'm on the smaller end. And I'm not super tall, only 5'5", nor am I overweight. I've never had anyone tell me they're not normal, so I've been assuming they are. Same, I'm generally neutral to my stretch marks, so I think it's sort of funny if I'm told to see them as a badge of honor for going through puberty. I agree with that too. I'm of the opinion that it's not something to be ashamed over, but also not something I'm proud of. I mean, all I did was grow like nature made me. I was pregnant twice and have no stretch marks, even though the whole time I felt like I was about to pop. I do have stretch marks on my hips from puberty, which has baffled me because even the after version of me was pretty skinny back then. I don't hate them, I'm just like, okay. I will never forget a girl in my gym class at high school when we were required to undress in front of strangers every day. She was plump and had a lot of very striking vertical marks all around her abdomen. They were still in the new red phase, and I felt pretty bad for her when someone else yelled from across the locker room, "Beth, what happened? You've got all those scratches on your stomach," causing everyone to look at her. I died of vicarious embarrassment for her that day. So yes, the knowledge of non-pregnancy related stretch marks needs to be more widely known. Noctuella, it is amazing that you have none from a pregnancy, which is always a fast and extreme stretch, whereas you don't have them from simply growing up. This has me thinking that perhaps whether stretch marks happen or not is not based on the skin stretching, but on something else. I'm thinking it nutrition or stress or both. Or hormones. Haha. I was actually asking that but then deleted my comment thinking it might be like the lady asking in the first place. I was so curious. Thanks for sharing. Like growing pains, growing stretch marks. 1+ for short people that never have such a growing spurt. Haha. 1+ for short people that never have such a growing spurt. I'm not even tall. I'm just below average for a woman. I wish I was tall. It's not something I would say to a body client like that, so sorry for that. But easily stretch marked skin is a symptom of connective tissue disorders, or just growing really fast in your teens. For me, this is 100% why it happened. I'm 5'4", or 163 centimeters, and that used to be bang on average for women. Now it's 5'5". I've never had an issue with my looks or body, but I always wanted to be tall lol. I don't have any daughters, but I would advise young girls, and parents of young girls, that puberty absolutely can result in stretch marks. I don't know if moisturizing/using creams can completely stop the damage, but even if it doesn't, stretch marks aren't the end of the world and nothing to be embarrassed about. Do you have hypermobile joints? Also, I was getting a Brazilian wax. It was only like my second one, and the lady said in a really annoyed voice while down there, "Oh my God," and I freaked out and asked what was wrong, thinking something was off or gross with my lady bits. And she was like, "That kid won't shut up. Why aren't the parents stopping him screaming?" And I realized there was a very annoying child close by screaming, but I had blocked it out cause was too worried about getting waxed. I once went to Boots, a beauty/drug store in the Duck, and asked the workers for some advice on something unrelated. They asked me about my skincare routine, and when I said I didn't have one, they stroked my face, went, "OMG, it's so rough." Like, thanks. I actually have quite nice skin, but for ages I was really worried because I didn't use 5 different creams a day. Most men don't, and they're fine. The beauty industry is not nor ever has been about making women feel good about themselves. Yeah, I could have lived without my ex-husband pointing out that my nose is crooked, and consequently one nostril is larger than the other. Wished I had the wallet for a rhinoplasty ever since. I swear to God, I had not a freaking clue until he came out with that one day. Sigh. A dentist asked me a few years later, "When did you break your nose?" After doing one of those 180 degrees x-rays of my face. Even I could see then that the bone in my nose wanders sideways. The funny thing is, I have zero recollection of ever breaking my nose. None. It appears straight in childhood photos until about 8th grade, and then beats the hell out to me. Never had a black eye, never had a huge swollen schnoz, nothing. It seems to have just grown that way. I have a deviated septum. I was hit in the face super hard as a kid and remember it being insanely tender for a year afterward. I was never treated for it, and my parents usually said we were acting out for attention if we complained about pain. I now have a pronounced bump even though both sides of my family have straight or ski jump noses. I also got the terrible vision and most crooked teeth, so it just adds to the allure. But seriously, I get a little bitter about not at least getting a cute nose out of the deal. So I think sometimes they may get mild breaks that end up looking more severe as we get older. Ear/nose/throat, and sometimes even general doctors have often asked me how I got my nose broken. Nope, doc, that's just Neanderthal genetics. Got that big old bump there to protect the rest of my face from boxing saber-toothed tigers. All the men in my family have that dominant nose bump, pirate style, and to a lesser extent, women in our family as well. Though, a lot of us also have a love of unorganized boxing too, including the women O0. Genetics are weird and lovely. A woman with a nose of character can be even more sexy. Don't have to be a Barbie doll button nose to be beautiful. Mine is like that too. My husband noticed it back when we were in high school, and I could never figure out how it happened either. I went to an aunt and have had a rhino, and the doctors told me sometimes they can just develop that way, even over time. Fun stuff. A complex is a strong or disproportionate concern or anxiety about something. A couple specific and relatively common examples are a Napoleon complex where someone, typically short, is obsessed with their high, and an Oedipus complex where someone is in love with their mother. Same here. The dentist said I like the top part of your face, but not the bottom part. Since then, I'm very aware of my mouth and chin. After 30 years, I still hear him say it. He probably meant that your jaw is messing your teeth up a little bit. Likely in a way only dentists would ever notice or care about. One of my patients, I'm a nurse, was noted as being unremarkable by a doctor and was so genuinely hurt that I got the doctor to explain it to her, and that he liked her very much but didn't think she had anything to worry about. When my grandma had her first scan after being diagnosed with cancer, we got a good laugh reading grossly unremarkable brain. The cancer was everywhere else. Lol, I got some flimsy glasses and all my friends were commenting that my glasses were crooked. I was like, shut up assholes, one eye is higher than the other. I think for me it's one ear is either too low or too high. I hadn't noticed it in a long time, but as soon as I noticed it again, I couldn't not see it every time in front of a mirror now. I discovered this problem a couple years ago, when I got my first set of glasses at 29. Moved on to contacts pretty quickly because it was glaringly obvious and driving me insane. Did you ever let the eye tighten the side that was crooked? Mine does that when they are loose. My nose is slightly off of plumb, so I always have that same problem with sunglasses. I just get really big sunglasses to compensate, lol. I think you can compensate for this by adjusting the nose piece of your glasses. That is, if your eye is actually higher than the other. I went to a dermatologist for a rash during COVID. Dude didn't give a flying fuck about my rash. He walked in the door and immediately started staring at the zits on my forehead from 6 inches away. My acne isn't even that bad. Best part? The nurse who checked me in turned out to be a woman I just matched on Bumble. Goodbye, match. I hate that. I have some sort of unidentified connective tissue disease and was having a lot of different skin symptoms, plus had a positive C&C which means I could have had vasculitis, which can sometimes be seen on the skin. Whether it was vasculitis or I had psoriasis or anything like that, very different I know, but I had like every symptom of every disease like both vasculitis and psoriatic arthritis. This dermatologist basically refused to acknowledge that, refused to look at the mole on my back my husband said looked suspicious, refused to give me any treatment for what he said was a yeast infection on the skin on my chest, and instead wrote a script for rosacea. I was so pissed. I also have eczema, and wanted to ask about whether there is better treatment available like Arc shampoo or something. The nurse cut me off and flat out told me that's not related to identifying the connective tissue disease. Okay, but like this is a dermatologist, right? So he would be the one to help with that too? It was a private practice if I remember correctly, so I think she just wanted money for a relatively easy fix. She was pretty pushy about it and even described how I could lie to my friends about why my head was bandaged lol. I was 14. I've got ears like Obama with a minimal anti-helical fold so they stick out a bit. And of course, every 14-year-old girl loves to hear about how ugly her features are from a plastic surgeon lol. When I was a young teen, I needed to get my wisdom teeth removed. The office where my mom took me also did cosmetic surgery. The doctor took us into his office, looked at me, and said to my mom, "She has an underdeveloped chin. We could fix that." I hadn't realized anything was wrong with my chin until that moment, but that doc did give me a habit that sticks with my into my 30s, of flexing my neck and pushing my chin out. I'm glad to find I'm not the only one who was given a complex by a medical professional. Plastic surgeons have no filter or trying to drum up more business. I went in to get a keloid scar evaluated, and he said, "How about some new boobies next time?" I was in my late 20s when diagnosed with thyroid disease. My pep sent me to an endocrinologist who told me I must hate myself because I was fat. This was a lead up to him handing me a brochure for a fat camp for adults that lasted for 6 months. What about my husband? What about my job, my family? He was the most arrogant man I've ever met. I got the last laugh around 12 or so years ago, when his office was raided by the FBI and DEA, and he's arrested for selling/writing excessive prescriptions for opioids and for murdering his soon-to-be ex-wife. This is maybe just my decidedly non-expert opinion, but I feel like an endocrinologist, of all people, should know that adult fat camp is going to be of minimal help to somebody with hypothyroidism. I should have added that years later I found out he had quite the financial stake in said farm. Back when I was diagnosed, 30-plus years ago, he was newish to my area with great credentials and educational background. So my pep said. I told her I didn't care. I was never going back to a doctor who thought it was appropriate to argue with me that I hated myself, and this was the only way to fix me. That he pulled the same stunt with my paid-to-office manager, so my doctor stopped referring her patients to him. Then karma caught up with him. My ophthalmologist called her assistant in to show how asymmetrical my face was. I went to see an ENT about an issue, and the resident casually asked me when my nose had been broken since it was off-center. Now it's all I see. At least it doesn't cause me any issues breathing. It's only a little crooked. My friend bashed her head into my face when I tickled her. My fault. My dentist gave me a complex about some small yellow dots on my teeth. I got a lot of penicillin as a child due to constant tonsillitis. No one ever said anything about it, but ever since she said that I want to hide my smile. Never hide your smile. Your dentist is a douche. They can just remove it and fill it up with your teeth color. I've had the same done for some discoloration. It's not even expensive. I would recommend it if it makes you hide your smile. I mean, sure, you could do that, and then meticulously maintain your current level of tooth staining. Otherwise, you might end up with stained teeth with white spots when you're older. I vote stop brushing until it all matches, and find someone who loves you for your personality, which according to every dental hygienist's dating profile I've ever seen, will not be them. That didn't happen to me, the white spots. I had stained front teeth from antibiotics, and when I was like 14 the dentist bleached them, and you can't tell they are different to my other teeth over 20 years later. And asymmetrical faces are far more interesting to have, imho. When I was learning to draw faces, we specifically practiced getting away from perfect symmetry because it looked too unrealistic and or idealistic. I had a manager at a restaurant I worked at when I was 20 ask me point blank if I was aware that my right eye is obviously higher than my left. No, I wasn't. Now I for sure am. Did he have solutions to offer? Jerk move, otherwise. Not a doctor, but when I told my mom I was getting my boobs done, she said, "Oh, I thought you would have spent money to fix your teeth first instead, Lamau. I'm currently doing Invisalign." I went to see an eye doctor at like 28 years old for the first time. Before the exam even started, the doctor said to me, "Have you had plastic surgery, or has your eyes always been crooked? Apparently one is slightly higher than the other. I blame every weird eye thing on it now, lol. My nose is crooked, and many doctors have just said, so you broke your nose at some point." Nope, just Slavic. What an odd comment. In many art forms, asymmetry ends up being more beautiful and fascinating. I hope you love your unique face, and you don't let that callous comment bug you. Especially if you didn't even notice your asymmetry until they said that. All faces are asymmetrical, some are just a bit more than others. Yeah, I went to a plastic surgeon for a consult on fixing one of my breasts. I was 24. After the consult, I had closed the gown and he said, "You could look more feminine if I gave you a mini facelift with a chin implant and shaved that bump out of your nose. You have nice eyes, but your other features are pretty masculine." Gee, thanks. So no joke. My dentist told me I had a crooked top palate, kind of like what Tom Cruise has where one of the front teeth is more in the center. I fucking thought about that so much that I paid to have braces twice for 9 goddamn years of my life in total. All because I felt self-conscious of something no one else could see but a dentist. My dentist asked me, "How do you eat apples with that underbite?" From the side, but I had no idea that was why. I had a doctor point out that my eyes were at slightly different heights, and now I'm hyper aware of it. Nobody else notices or cares, but I do. That bitch. A few years ago, my ENT informed me that I had a deviated septum and my nose was crooked / my face was wonky. Developed a full-blown complex about it, and several years of staring at my face on Zoom over COVID did not fucking help. But I'm finally okay with my face again. He's also dead now, unrelated. I was at the derm for a skin check, and she asked me if I wanted to do anything about my acne. And there I was thinking I was having the good skin day now. I just discovered that looking from below, you know, where most of my preferred dating partners would be in height, that my nostrils and tip of my nose are wildly asymmetrical, and that's been on my mind for 24 hours now. I know it's nothing, but I was pretty sure I had my body figured out before nearly 40. Still remember the pediatrician who suggested they could surgically correct my lazy eyelid. I know people say shit to be polite, but unless I'm really tired. At which point they're probably more focused on me looking like a raccoon. People say they don't notice. If people do notice, I figure they'll just knock another 10 to 20 IQ points off their estimate of me. Oh, you just reminded me of a similar one I got. I have migraine. One of the standard treatments is Botox. This neuro was very pro-Botox. While examining me and talking up Botox, he says, and it will help with the droopy eyebrows / lids too. I think I got an or an O out, but I don't have droopy eyelids / brows. Or at least I don't think I do. Messed with my head a little for a bit though. Damn, I don't know how I'd feel knowing I fucked up enough to be remembered by an emergency surgeon. Not great lol. I literally broke my knee 90 degrees sideways. It had to be forced straight, by him, then immediately into surgery to repair basically every ligament and piece of soft tissue in there. Lucky ID. Didn't get a fake knee at 17 from that one. Back pain, I'm not young. Doctor just said basically, well, that's just life for you. You're tall. So I'm just going to end up being a hunched over 90-year-old. Lol, you're not going to see 90. Pardon. How many tall old people have you ever seen? A debate, including female nurses, on the utility of hand jobs. Another favorite was the last time I cheated on my wife was 2011 when I fucked a nurse in the bathroom at a work party, and that's why I don't go to work parties anymore. They really will just let loose. Lots of fun to work with and boundaries are respected, but mostly absent. Great job, school bro, earned yourself some burpees. When I was 17, had surgery for a torsion of the testicle. 15 years later, in again for a bladder stone. Hey, that scar looks familiar, I ever do work on you. Hilariously, a couple years later, 3,000 miles away in a different province, ER for a really bad UTI. Doc is checking stuff and says, hey, did Darchin do that surgery? That man is a master. Nobody cuts like that. Damn, did he carve his initials in there or what? Shit, was it Dar Brown in TX? Because he said the same thing about my right knee at 17 from a ski tournament, and it wasn't 2 years later when I was like, Sue, I'm calling from Canada, booking a ticket back, there's been a development with the left one. Orthopedic folks are very casual about bones. I have osteonecrosis, bone death, in one knee, and after some x-rays my doctor said in a very offhand manner, oh yeah, your right knee's dead too. And that right hip. That means replacement joint soon, and he talks about it like it's an oil change. He's playing poker telling his buddies how he had a joke with a patient that took 10 years to come full circle and is super proud of it. I once was in the ER for severe abdominal pain that was located around my appendix and had been going on for days. Nothing else had been out of whack, and I mean nothing. I got an abdominal CT, and when he came in with the results, grinned and told me I was just severely constipated. So it turns out you're just totally full of shit. I laughed and asked him how long he'd been waiting to use that one on a patient, and he said, a very long time. He was a very jokey guy and just had to wait for a constipated patient who he knew would laugh and not complain. My knee surgeon remembered me like 15 years later. I was amazed. Once you go inside someone's body, it's hard to forget them. We spend a lot of time thinking about you, planning your surgery, talking to you before and after surgery. In neurosurgery, you can probably show me a picture of a scan of any person I've operated on in the past 5 years and I'll remember them. After fucking up my ankle skateboarding, my doctor says to me, do you know how many golfers I get in here? None. Pick a better hobby. I turned 50 recently. The BMX injuries are really starting to catch up to me. And we were not launching off 40-foot vert ramps in the 80s. I can only imagine the condition these kids today will be in at 50. Lol. My wife broke her finger, and when getting pit, her physical therapist looked at her hand and said, girl, you done jacked that finger up. What tricks or setup were you doing to gain each injury? My son does street/freestyle BMX. He got a mild concussion at 16. He's 22 now, and that convinced him to wear his Dan helmet. But he's avoided any serious injury. A lot of road rash and shin gouges though. The severe one was from a 360 tail whip gone wrong. I don't do those anymore, lol. The second one was just dumb bad luck on an insignificant trick. Whenever I see my son do a 360 tail whip, I watch with a great deal of anxiety. I am almost 50. There are low fences I won't try to step over anymore because I am afraid I will catch my foot, hit the dirt, and knock all my teeth out. So, I feel you. In my 20s, I hairline fractured my shoulder and tore some tendons while BMX racing. Like the typical 20-something dipshit I was, I held off going to the hospital and kept racing for 3 weeks. Couldn't elevate my arm, was nearly blacking out from pain during races. Finally got myself to the ER, got x-rays, and after a short snarky aside with an intern about whether I felt safe at home, the doctor comes in, slaps my films in the viewer and turns to look at me. And I quote, well, you're a fucking dumbass, aren't you? Ha! When I was 16, I had an ingrown toenail. Went to the foot doctor, he did a quick surgery to fix me up, local anesthesia, nothing fancy. When I was 19, I thought I had an ingrown toenail in the other foot. Turns out that a hair has gotten caught underneath it. But I was right to notice something was off and I needed attention, and I went to the same foot doctor to get it sorted. Anyway, I walked in and the doctor said, "So how's your toe healing up?" And I was like, "Doc, that was 3 years ago. It healed fine. I'm in college now and I got another foot thing." And the doctor just sort of got confused, and then I just sort of got confused because seriously, how did 3 years pass so quickly? I feel like, in that moment, both me and the doctor realized that we're not as young as we thought. I mean, the doc was honestly quite young, early 30s, I'd imagine. But it's always a weird moment when you realize that you can't remember the difference between 6 weeks and 3 years. I feel like your story is better. Mine is weird and existential at the end. Sounds like me and my orthopedic surgeon. 12 years after the first knee. I'm glad to see me work is still holding up well, but what did you do this time? Ortho surgeons are built different. Got in an accident with my so a few months back. A woman came to help him fill out his medical stuff while he was in a hospital bed. He was grumpy and snappy with her. When she asked what language he preferred, he said German, being a smart ass. We both forgot about it, and for the next 2 months we were receiving mail from the hospital in German. Figured it was an error in their system. We finally went into the hospital to figure out MIDI calendar. The woman helping us walked up and stared at us weirdly for like 5 seconds, and then went, "I know you. You were being an asshole with me and said you spoke German." She continued to make fun of my so, in a lighthearted, funny way, as she helped us. We both really like her lol. I gotta ask, how bad was the original injury that the ER doc who saw for all of a few hours not only remembered you, but was able to recognize you 10 years later? It was bad. He said one of the worst he'd seen, knee-wise. Probably saw his name on the electronic medical record of when he last treated you. Or do doctors actually remember their patients? I always wondered that. The surgeon was missing his scalpel. That is how he remembered you. Did he also x-ray the other leg? And he wearing glasses to show that time had passed. He knew you'd be back. He knew the kind of lifestyle you would continue to live. Was he wearing glasses to signify that time has passed? Orthos are the equivalent of brutal carpenters. Emergency medicine and orthopedists are just different, and that does not surprise me at all. My dad got into so many accidents as a child because he was a daredevil with no sense of self-preservation. The medical staff knew him by name, and his doctor described him by saying he could be in a rubber raft on a lake on the calmest of days, and he'd find a way to kick a hole in it and drown. Orthos are the bras of the medical world lol. Dropping a casual/careful F-bomb or shit in the conversation is actually a really good way to build rapport with certain patients. On one end of my service as a neurosurgeon, we cater to rich people who need back surgery, always polite and proper around them. But on the other end, we serve a very poor trauma population with lots of gunshot wounds, MBCs, etc. When you're trying to break through to one of these guys, and he's cussing up a storm over the pain of the MVC, dropping in a little casual "man, you really got fucked up, huh?" with a smile will sometimes make them relax and come over to your side for a bit. Similar experience was experiencing cramping at around 20-ish weeks pregnant. He told me to go to the hospital because we don't fuck around with preterm labor. I loved his candidness. You couldn't live with your failure, so where'd that bring you? Back to me. The surgeon probably. In the summer, a local skiing area runs outdoor motocross. It's local guys, so nothing too crazy, but it's fun to watch. Well, one day we're doing the normal thing, watching and cheering. Someone takes a fall and one of the track crew run over and start talking to him. From body language you can tell she was telling him to sit still and she was going to check out his back. As soon as she gets behind him, she starts waving her hands over her head like a madman. Then comes back into him field of view looking totally calm and started explaining something to him. I turned to the people I was with and we all had the same, "Shit, you only act like that when you don't want someone to know how fucked up they are look." Dude turned out fine, broken collarbone and cracked a vertebrae, I think. He retired after that fall. Couple weeks later, a dude broke his jaw in a fall and my cousin, who had raced for years up until then, went ahead and called it quits too. Better to learn from someone else's injuries than your own. Back pain, I'm not young. Doctor just said basically, well, that's just life for you. You're tall. So I'm just going to end up being a hunched over 90-year-old. Lol, you're not going to see 90. Pardon. How many tall old people have you ever seen? Oh, yeah, How tall are you? I'm a 6 feet tall woman, and I think about this a lot. There are no tall old ladies. Just little olds. Egate. Everyone chiming in to give me hope of a long life. I love you. Reminder, you shrink as you age. Those little old ladies used to be taller. Oof. Unfortunately, he has a point. For a while, I knew a guy who was over 6'5" and worked as a genetic counselor. One time we were chatting, and he just casually mentioned that he wasn't expecting to get terribly old. He knew the statistics because of his job, and the odds are not good for people over 6. On the other hand, that's just averages, not an individual outcome. Plenty of short people die in car accidents in their 20s, and plenty of tall people live well into old age. We just celebrated my grandpa's 96. He was 6'4", and now he's a little shorter than me at 6. He had 4 older siblings, 1 sister, and 3 brothers. They all died between 90 to 95, so he's made it the longest. All of them were fairly tall, but my grandpa was the tallest. See now, that's what's going to get you. Mine too. He was born in 1920 and lived to be 95. Part of the reason for these stats is just that people in previous generations were shorter overall for various reasons. My grandma was 5'8", which was super tall for a woman born in 1915. She lived to be 95 as well. My dad is 6'5" and 70 in a few months and has had 0 health problems. I went to a cardiologist for some heart scares and he straight up told me, because I'm shorter and quite thin with no congenital defects, I'm more likely to live a longer life than most other men. And then he used the same example, how many tall or fat old people have you seen? My only guess is that it has something to do with circulation, and the taller/more fat you are, the more difficulty your body will have functioning normally as you age. Just conjecture. But it does seem true that taller/fatter people live shorter lives. Actually, what's interesting is statistics show that being a little bit overweight as you age is better than being a little or a lot underweight. Some amount of fat is protective when you're older. Elderly people who are very lean do quite poorly when something happens to them like a fall. If you have a little cushion, it helps protect from bone breaks and falls, and gives you reserves to survive extended hospitalizations. Thin elderly people are more likely to get bed sores and so on. Of course, the data is all full of noise, so it's hard to parse, but this makes me less stressed about the fluff I've accumulated through the years. Gravity and air pressure will slowly compress you over the course of the day. Now consider that for 366 days for 90 years. Also, nutrition was wildly different 90 years ago. We had different contaminants and dietary habits that affected our bodies, different ideals for beauty, etc. All that to say you must live to be a centennial basketball player. Also, nutrition was wildly different 90 years ago. We had different contaminants and dietary habits that affected our bodies, different ideals for beauty, etc. I swear to God, when I was a freshman in high school, 5'11" was tall. When I was a senior in high school, all the freshmen were like 6'2". I don't know what the hell happened in just 2 to 3 years, but either everyone started eating their Wheaties, or there was something wrong with my Wheaties. My dad is 6'2". My sister's dad is 6'3". My stepdad was 6'3". And my mom's current husband is 6'4". My perspective might be mildly distorted, but I swear all the 15-year-olds are now reaching those heights. What if it's just evolution? Tall people get laid more, at least according to Tinder. In general, I think height has trended upward for the human race, but I don't think the trend is significant enough for people to notice in a generation. I had a similar thing in college. I'm 5'11", and I felt tiny next to the freshman students when I was in grad school. They still insisted on calling me sir when I picked up their assignments. I was only like 3 years older than them. Taller freshmen trying to make it abundantly clear they respect you, swinging it all the way back to slightly insulting. My grandpa-in-law is 96 and was maybe 6'3" at his highest. Wah wah. He's still 6 feet tall, still drives, and has only started slowing down the past 2 to 3 years. His secret is exercise, and preventative health care and money. But also exercise. I'm sorry, there is absolutely no way a 96-year-old should be driving. If we can have a minimum age, surely we can have a maximum. He does not drink or smoke. I don't think he's ever drank, except maybe 2 to 3 times in his life. He eats average, but doesn't indulge on sugar. He played tennis every day until maybe 6 to 7 years ago. He still golfs regularly, and he spent his parenthood traveling for business and backpacking with his kids. He also goes to all of his recommended daycare appointments regularly. Of course, this isn't black and white. Being able to afford a gym, afford your wife, basically raising your kids while you work, manage your emotions while you work to avoid burnout, all gray areas and different kinds of expectations for his life and skills acquired throughout. You wouldn't want to be 76. That's gonna be the normal retirement age by the time we get there. I agree with the sentiment, but I will take as much life as I can get so long as I'm healthy. I want to go no earlier than 65. But after that, I want to go as soon as my body starts failing me to the point that it messes up day-to-day life. My wife's grandfather just passed away. He was 6'11" tall and lived to be 89. I now suspect your doctor murdered him to keep his statement correct. I mean, depends on if you are talking NBA tall or regular people tall. If you go to the Netherlands, you will see plenty of tall old people, since there are lots of tall people there, and they generally have a very healthy lifestyle and stay more active than the average American. I know someone who is pretty tall and whose siblings are quite tall. The parents aren't crazy tall. I don't think, but they got some tall gene happening. I don't know. One of the sons is like, I don't know, a good distance over 6, anyway, remarkably so. Apparently, just about every doctor he's ever seen has thought that he/she was going to be the first one to diagnose him with Marfan syndrome. It's like every time, no, I don't have Marfan syndrome, I'm just tall. If it helps, my grandfather was 6'6" in his prime. He's a couple of inches shorter now at 83, and has had both hips, knees, and shoulders replaced as well as a lumbar fusion, but is in pretty good shape otherwise. He jumped in the pool a couple of months ago even. As a 5'11" woman, I think about this sometimes. Tall people actually do live shorter lives, they think due to having more cells that get exposed to free radicals and such. However, being tall is also associated with lower risk of dementia and heart disease. So it isn't all bad. I have not seen a lot of tall old people. They exist but are rare. I think the leading cause of death, at least in the US, is cardiovascular illness, and you have a higher chance of that when you're tall. I might be wrong though, but those are also caused by obesity, so who knows if my wires are crossed. Personally, I've seen quite a few. You just compress and hunch over as you age. It's kinda crazy how much cancer is correlated with size in humans. You kinda want to be slightly underweight and short if you want to end up old. Japan has the longest lifespan. Netherlands has excellent health care. But as the tallest country, they've chopped off 5 years of life on average. The heaviest country in the world, Nauru, also has one of the lowest life expectancies at 20 years lower than Japan. The US is taller and fatter than Japan, with worse health care, and have 8 years off. My dad was 6'3" at his peak. He is 83 and just took a test to assess his overall health, comparing him to other people his age. The doctor told him that on the inside, he was only 67. This is a man who smoked for years and used to have a glass of bourbon every night before bed. By age 60, he had decided that he needed to exercise. Apparently, it's working. Still has the occasional bourbon though.